You remember that feeling when you finally learned to ride a bike? Or when you got the training wheels off, or when you got to drive with your dad on his lap and driving the truck for the first time, or maybe when dad said, hey, I want you to go and summer follow, and sent you out in the field by yourself. That feeling of being grown up and feeling independent, or when you finally got your license and just the whole world opened up to you. You know, it was the same in every progression, that even when you learned to ride a bike, all of a sudden your friend's house became closer, or the neighborhood seems so much bigger. And in discipleship, it's very similar to that, isn't it? Now, we don't just jump into those points. We grow and we progress into those things. Just like learning to ride a bike or learning to drive, there's a progression in getting to that point. Now, do we get there just by gaining information, by learning what does the gas pedal and the brake pedal do, and learning what a stop sign means? Or is there more to it? Does it have to be information only? Or is there a part of it that's actually formational and transformational? We have to learn and adapt and be changed ourselves so that we are capable of going about these things. And I think it's a combination of both. And so today, as we talk about discipleship, we want to look at the interaction between information and transformation, or formation. Paul said in Galatians 4:19, he says, I labor as in the pains of childbirth to see Christ formed in you. This is the role and the goal of disciples and disciple makers, is to see Christ formed in us. So we are undergoing a transformation which comes about, yes, through information, but also through the formation of putting these things into practice. So let's dive into it.
Get in the vehicle. The first thing you want to do is you want to buckle up. Then you want to make sure you can start your car. Make sure all your gauges are good. There's nothing air dramatically. Check all your mirrors. Set properly. All 3 side mirrors. All right, now if it's safe to proceed. Foot on the brake. Put the vehicle into reverse. Check all your mirrors and the blind spots, and back up out of the driveway. Gently over the bumps, protecting the brake. Put the vehicle into drive, put on the brake, release, and start driving.
You know, we gather information in a lot of different ways, don't we? If you've ever observed a 2-year-old or 3-year-old, they can get in a toy car, crank a key over, turn the gear shift down, and make vroom vroom noises. Well, how did they learn that? They took that in from somewhere. Well, it's probably that you didn't teach them how to drive a car. They just observed you doing it. That's a humbling thing when you think about it, to know that your kids are watching you and imitating you. And we all gain information that way, don't we? We gain insight in how to live life by watching other people. We also gain information by asking questions. That's why your 2-year-old, your 3-year-old, your 4-year-old will drive you crazy asking why. But those questions are really important to our transformation, because it is in the gathering of this information and in the pursuit of it that we really start to grow. So Jesus tells his disciples, again in the Great Commission, to teach them all that I have taught you, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded. We do that through modeling. We do that through learning to observe other people and ask the questions, and then to take in information, to learn and to read your own Bible, to dig into it. And we do that in community as well, because we need other people to watch. But is just gathering the information enough to learn to drive, or is there more to it than that? And this is where I think we need to take the next step. We move from information to formation.
All right, you got your seatbelt on, you're buckled up, you checked your mirrors, you're good. Out of the driveway, covering the brake, which is good. Stop. Oh, he's getting advanced. Ooh. Look at you, professional.
Well, I don't know how many of you are like me, but I sort of learned to drive in a field or in a forest where it was just me. I could bump into trees or bales or something, but that was about it. And, you know, so it is with our Christian faith. Sometimes we're learning and we grow, but at some point we have to learn to grow in community. We have to learn to be around other people. The psalmist said in Psalm 133 verse 1, and he says, how good and pleasant it is when the people of God dwell in unity. And then Paul, he talks about all these diverse people with diverse gifts being one body with many parts, and he could see the strain that was going to put on relationships. And so he pauses in 1 Corinthians 13 and he talks about love. In the middle of all this talk about church, he recognizes that within the middle of all of this, there is the need for love. And you know, we need to connect with one another as well. This is a key ingredient to our discipleship, where what we believe becomes formational in relationship. God has designed us for relationship. God has designed our faith not to be held selfishly, but to be passed on to other people as well. And so we play a role. Each of us, me, you, doesn't matter what your gifting is, you are called to be a disciple who is building up the body of believers. Now, within that, and just like getting in a car and driving for the first time in a city, we recognize that we're going to come up to intersections and all these different things. And this is where all those rules and obedience and things come into play. Where I need to know when I need to yield, and you need to know when to stop. Or maybe it's just like a four-way stop and it's just awkward. Nobody knows what to do sometimes. But you know, God has given us these directives for our benefit and for the benefit of others. If there was no rules of the road and everyone just drove however they wanted to drive, we run the risk of bumping into each other, severely hurting, severely harming other people. And without practice, we're even more prone to do that. So God has given us a great training ground within the church where we have other believers to watch, but also to walk along with. We are learning to drive with other people who are learning to drive. And at the same time, we need to recognize and be forgiving, because we are going to make mistakes. Now, in that, we want to be aware ahead of time, just like, again, learning to drive, to anticipate how my actions are going to run into other people's lives. This is how we learn to avoid disaster. And so God is starting to form us into the images of His Son by making us more loving, by making us more patient, by helping us to be discerning of certain situations and things to avoid, when to swerve and when to slow down, or when it's time to speed up and move forward. What is your role to play? And how do we navigate this whole course with a whole bunch of other people at the same time? It's a beautiful thing when it all works and when there's unity. But when there's disunity, we can sure feel the pain and we end up crashed sometimes. So be patient. This is all part of the formation process. But just understand that how you drive affects somebody else. And just like it is in your Christian life, how you live your Christian life will affect somebody else.
Remember, there's a bump. Nice. Through the crossbar, good. Crashing the system. Accelerating too fast. Oh well.
You know, Christ has given us the keys to a pretty incredible opportunity here. He has given us new birth into a living hope according to what He has done for us. He has died on the cross to free us from our sin. He has given us His Spirit to guide us, to counsel us, and to empower us for His purpose and for His glory. And the world is ours in a sense. And so we receive this thing by faith, but just like a kid at 16 who receives his license and is given the keys to a car, and he doesn't go anywhere. And maybe that's been your experience. You've been a Christian for a long time, but you've gone nowhere. It's done nothing. It's accomplished nothing, and you've never moved forward in that. I can feel that pain. I understand that. But that is not an excuse or a permission to stay there. Jesus tells His disciples that He intends for them to go. Get off their butt and go. God doesn't want us to stay stagnant. He doesn't save us without a purpose. He is calling us into something and to go somewhere. Paul tells Timothy in 1 Timothy 4:16, he says, Timothy, my son, Timothy was his young disciple. He's training him up to be a pastor and shepherding other people. And so Timothy had some clear instructions from Paul. Paul says, Timothy, watch your life and your doctrine closely, because in so doing you'll save both yourself and also your hearers. So Paul recognizes that for Timothy to be a pastor and to be able to shepherd somebody else, or even just to protect his own life, he needed to watch two things: what he teaches or what he believes, his doctrine, and also how he lives. Well, why? Why is that important? Well, have you ever been in a car with somebody and then you said, well, okay, I need to know where to turn. And the guy says, yeah, it's over there somewhere. We'll find it. We'll don't worry about it. We'll get there. That's honestly how many people today use their Bibles, isn't it? You ask somebody, if you were to have a biblical discussion, many people are just like, yeah, I think it's in the Bible somewhere, isn't it? Well, yeah, but the Bible is a lot more clear. And it says, thus saith the Lord. There's an authority behind it. I'd feel a lot more confident to have somebody say, turn right up here. I know where I'm going. And so Paul is telling Timothy, watch your doctrine and what you believe, because your doctrine has a way of guiding our lives and our next steps. It is the confidence that we have in the things that we believe. It's the skeleton, in a sense, that we hang everything else on. Is God sovereign or is he not sovereign? Does God have purpose? And is he merciful? Is he loving? Is he also just? All these doctrines are really important. And he actually instructs Timothy in 1 Timothy 4 at the very beginning in verse 1 there. He says, watch out for false teachers because they have the doctrine of demons. And we know Satan's whole desire is to deceive. And so there is doctrine that is false. So Paul is instructing Timothy, watch out that your doctrine is good. What you are believing and what you are teaching, that is the first thing that we need to be intentional about. That can be done through gaining information and asking questions, all the things we've talked about already. But the second one is really important. Watch your doctrine and what you teach other people, but watch also how you live your life. Oh boy, many of you have been discipled accidentally, and you are actually discipling others accidentally. And so your life is rubbing off on other people. People are looking at you and watching you because you say you're a Christian, but you don't realize the implications of that. So watch your life, how you are living carefully, because first of all, it's going to save you from a lot of grief. The Bible gives us clear instructions on how God wants us to live, the things that he wants us to abstain from or get rid of or cut out of our life. He also gives us instructions of things that we're supposed to take in and do. And so how you live becomes very important for your own faith and for your own life, but it's also important for others. So God is calling us to be intentional both in shaping what we believe, but also in what we teach. He is also wanting us to be intentional about how we are living and then how we are modeling for other people to live. So when Jesus tells his disciples, I want you to go and make disciples of all nations, he's calling them to a very intentional process of being transformed, because he knows that their life is going to transform other people's lives. And so older men teach younger men, according to 1 Peter 5. Older women teach younger women. And then there's another intentionality that you're maybe not going to like as much. Younger men, younger women, submit yourselves to those older people. We have a personal responsibility, don't we? To train up those around us. Maybe up until this point, you've been doing that accidentally. Let's take stock of this. God has thrown the doors wide open. He's called us to an incredible purpose to go into the whole world. So next week, we're going to look at this idea. God is calling us to our neighbors and to the nations. And somewhere in between, or maybe at one end or the other, God has called you to be an example to somebody else. But it starts with being intentional with both your life and your doctrine. Till next week, we love you, and I can't wait to be back together. We'll see you soon.
This is what you do while you're driving. Hey, good looking, how you doing, huh? Yeah.